All right, thank you, and welcome to another Tok Story. And this time we have another guest with us. Thank you for joining us. And can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Patrick. My name is Eric Katovai, and I'm from the Solomons. I'm currently working at the University of the South Pacific, senior lecturer in environmental.
Thank you, Eric. Good to see you again. And it's been a while. Now, Eric, can you share with us your background? Because I know that you've been working in the environment in Solomon Islands for quite some time. You did your master's and also your PhD looking at regeneration in log forests on Kolobangara Island. Can you give us a little snippet of your research in Solomon Islands?
Thank you, Patrick. So my master's was basically on the land use changes on floristic composition, really looking at understory species on Kolobangara. So we looked at different types of land uses. Logging was one of them. We looked at impact of vegetation and raising coconut plantations and commercial plantations. So that was quite a while. And we published a couple of papers on that and on that study. But I started focusing more on logging. I'm interested in the impact of logging because, as we all know, that logging does have environmental impact. But that statement is quite broad. There's a lot of impact you can actually specifically look at. So I decided to look at regeneration dynamics that is affecting the regeneration of log forests in the Solomon. Looking at Kolobangara, because Kolobangara does have a long history of logging. Logging actually started in Kolobangara in the early 1950s. So we actually had forests that have been logged over different time frames. So that's basically what we've been doing. And after that research, we are now basically looking at ways in which we can potentially restore the forest, not looking at a landscape operation at the moment, but looking at experimentations, looking at which techniques work, and hopefully we can workshop that to communities and also to communities in all parts of the Solomons. Is really a big issue in the Solomons.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, for those that are unaware, Kolobangara Island is a very interesting island in Solomons because it's an island that has attracted a lot of research. Most of the biodiversity research, ecology research, even genetics to do with wildlife have come from Kolobangara Island. In fact, Jared Diamond did his dissertation on Kolobangara Island, and his old campsite is called Professor Campsite. And at one stage, Kolobangara Island also had the longest forest monitored plot set up by T.C. Whitmore, I think, there on the north side of the island, I think around Poitete. That forest plot has now been deforested. So
that's history.
Yeah,
that's now history.
That's now history. So it kind of highlights also the impacts of logging on the island, and not just Kolobangara, but logging anywhere in the Solomons. Now let's talk about logging in the Solomons. There's a few pieces that have come from looking at the policy and different aspects of the logging industry in Solomons. As we know, the logging industry is also an important sector for the economy in the Solomons. So many times in decisions that are made, it leans towards economics more than it does towards sustainability. And Solomons has one of probably the worst rate of deforestation and logging practice, unsustainable logging practice on Earth. Not, well, let's not talk about the Pacific. This is on the planet today. What, can you, if you were to provide some advice to government, what would be the advice you would give to ensure there's some sort of sustainability within the industry?
That's a really good question, and I think that's a question that everybody is asking at the moment. We actually had a paper published in 2015 that actually looks at the factors that affects or that drives logging in the Solomons, and there were, I think, 6 factors that we've discussed in that paper. And one of the factors is economic development. As we, perhaps some of us know that logging is very important for the economy of the country. It actually contributes about 50 to 70% of the export revenue for the country. So if you're to remove logging from that equation, then the Solomon Islands economy is going to plummet, because at the moment there's no alternative measures that have been put in place. So we do have, the Solomon government does have policies, but unfortunately, due to manpower, finance, some of these policies have not really been monitored. So loggers tend to just go and do whatever they want to. And unfortunately, even when it comes to re-entry logging, which is, revisiting an area that has already been logged, there's no policy that states, how long you will allow that forest to recover before you go back and do a second logging or third logging. So any landowner can just invite a company, and a middleman or the licensee can just come in and just facilitate the process, and bring a company into an area that has been logged maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. So one thing that the government, I think, needs to really look at the moment is to try and put in some sort of policy that restricts re-entry logging, relogging of areas that have been logged in the past. And hopefully by doing that should basically stipulate how long the forest can regenerate, so that can have timber volume for logging. Again, as you mentioned, the logging practices in the Solomons are perhaps some of the worst in not only in the Pacific, but in the world. And it's in some previous studies, the logging practices at the moment is perhaps about 9%, nine times the sustainable rate, which is quite high. Yeah, so I think it's really a challenging situation at the moment. The government is trying to utilize logging as a form of revenue, creating avenue, but at the same time, they need to try and put some policies in order for them to, for the forest to regenerate, so that we can have this resource sustained for future. Now, this is perhaps something that is of a hope to a lot of people, because it's happening on the ground. So we're just trying to remind the government through some of the science or the findings that we or in the papers that we published, just to keep reminding the government and people, especially our younger generation who are now educated, to see the importance of sustaining this resource, the timber resource that we have. The Solomon Islands, we are blessed to have high volumes of timber. Our forests have high biomass, in other words. So if we are not careful, these forests are perhaps going to turn into some other vegetative types in the future. This is theoretical. It happens in other places. It might happen in the Solomons as well, although regeneration is really good because of the climate. But if we continue with the high intensity harvesting and no control in re-entry logging, then we might have grasslands in some parts of the islands.
Yes, especially if that is coupled with climate change, then the impacts may be great. Now, we hear about most of the negative impacts of logging in Solomons, but there are some examples of successful forestry, and maybe it pays to highlight industries that are more sustainable. And the only sustainable model that we have at the moment in the country is once again on Kolobangara. So you have the examples of what not to do on the same island and the examples of what to do in terms of sustainable forestry on the same island. And here's the model that we've always highlighted in terms of sustainable forestry, the Kolobangara Forest Plantations Limited. Now, KFPL is a FSC or Forest Stewardship Council certified company, which means that it logs, or well, it plants its trees and then it harvests the trees at a sustainable rate. And it also has a protected portion of the fixed term estate, which is the 400-meter contour of the island, because the island Kolobangara is almost spherical in it's almost perfectly circled. So it's an all dormant volcano. And so because it has been a FSC certified company for a long time, it's been able to export its timbers at a higher premium price than a normal company would. Now, in terms of the biodiversity, maintaining the biodiversity within that fixed term estate, the company's fixed term estate, they've done a really amazing job because they have also partnered with environmental organizations to help manage and maintain that protected area status within the timber company. So I guess another thing that I'd like to highlight here is this partnership. For a very long time, industry has seen us as conservationists and environmental managers as the enemy, when really we should be working hand in hand to better maintain and manage resources. So I've never seen an industry, especially a forestry industry, that has worked in close proximity with researchers and environmentalists and biodiversity researchers to maintain certain aspects of the habitat and the species that are endemic and are representative of that island, things that make that island special. So that's a model that I think could work elsewhere. But another thing that makes Kolobangara a little different is that the land is owned by the company. And so the human aspect, unfortunately, is removed. Whereas in a island that has landowner control, you'll have a lot of elements that are vying and fighting, and so that can be a challenge as well. Now, you've worked with Kolobangara Forest Plantations Limited, KFPL. Can you share some of your experience working with KFPL?
Yeah, KFPL has been very supportive to my research and to other researchers as well coming in from abroad. I think they do have a very good intention to support biodiversity across the island and working along with communities as well. As you mentioned, that around 3/4 of the island is owned by alienated land, and it's actually it's been taken over by that plantation company. Only 1/4 of the island is still customary land up to the 400-meter contour. Yeah, so currently KFPL has been supporting local growers around the island with seedlings, to try and come up with some sort of sustainable plantation, just to earn some money. I think that's the main challenge that not only people in Kolobangara, but everywhere in the Solomons, and I'm pretty sure in the Pacific region as well. But the challenge that we are facing is how to earn money. We are now living in a cash economy. in a world that is, in the Solomons, we use this phrase, manina toko. KFPL has been very instrumental in helping people set up their own plantations by providing seedlings and also facilitating biodiversity research across the island. They actually have this association, which we call KIPKA, which involves local communities as well, mapping out their land, looking at how best they can protect their environment, but at the same time, how can they earn a living, okay, from the resources that they do have. So as you mentioned, maybe traditionally, people tend to see us environmentalists and conservationists as the enemy, where we come in and say, don't do this, don't go there. Let's protect your forest. I think that mindset has changed over the years. I think we need to protecting biodiversity, we need to use the resources within that landscape as well. So one thing that that is a potential move for Kolobangara is to try and do some sort of landscape management scheme, where they plan out where to log, where to have your reserves, and what sort of resources do you have apart from logs. If you're to have a river catchment area, or if there's some species of importance, we need to try and educate our people on Kolobangara, as well as in the Solomon Islands, on how we can manage, our landscape, rather than just looking at a source of timber. The forest has other values as well. I mean, apart from ecosystem services, people can actually earn, some form of income from their forests. Yeah, but back to your questions, KFPL has been really supportive to my research. And I'm thankful that we have people like Ferguson and others who are still there, driving the biodiversity conservation, working with locals on the ground, and trying to strike some sort of balance where people can conserve their resources, but at the same time they can earn something out of it as well.